My Lords, first oral question, Lord Blunkett.
I beg to ask a question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, the Government has committed in its manifesto to protect democracy by strengthening the rules around donations to political parties. Foreign money has no place in our elections, and the rules already provide clear safeguards against foreign interference. We are considering changes which will help further protect our system from such risks, and we are engaging with the Electoral Commission as we do so. We welcome the views of and evidence from stakeholders. Details of our proposals will be brought forward in due course.
I very much welcome the answer by my noble friend, but would she agree that true patriots and those who believe in the sovereignty of our democratic system in the UK will want to see off those, whether they're malign state actors or multi-billionaires, who seek to interfere in our democracy? And is it not now that we must act to safeguard our future?
I agree with my noble friend, and can I assure him that the Government takes the threat posed by disinformation and foreign actors interfering in our democratic processes very seriously. It is and always will be an absolute priority to protect the UK against foreign interference. While it is clear that foreign donations to political parties are not permitted, the Government recognises the risk posed by malign actors who seek to interfere with and undermine our democratic processes. That's why we will take all necessary steps to ensure effective controls are in place to safeguard our democracy. I can assure noble lords we share the sense of urgency, and as soon as we've developed our proposals, we will inform Parliament.
My Lords, the front bench, Labour front bench in the Elections Bill 2022 put down amendments that would have granted many foreign nationals the right to vote in both local and parliamentary elections, and indeed that is our PPPR are suggesting this again. So how would Labour be able to restrict their donations, and what assessment has been made of the potential influx of foreign donations from Russia, China and Iran as a consequence of the Labour government in Wales and the Scottish government allowing their foreign citizens to be on the electoral roll?
My Lords, the law is already clear. Accepting or facilitating foreign campaign donations is illegal. Only those with a legitimate interest in UK electoral events can donate to candidates or political parties. Donations from individuals not on the electoral register are not permitted, and there are strict rules are in place to make sure that foreign money is prohibited from entering through proxy donors, providing a safeguard against impermissible donations by the back door. And we're looking at ways to make that even stronger. It's an offence to attempt to evade those rules on donations.
My Lords, does the noble lady the Minister accept that there can be problems with very large donations made to political parties, whether they may actually originate from abroad or be clearly from within the UK, and that the only way to prevent undue influence on political parties is to ban company donations and have a sensible cap on the size of all other donations? Does she then agree that political parties would still be able to campaign effectively if existing public funding was redistributed, for example, from the £100 million spent by the government in the last 2 general elections on distributing candidates' election addresses, and it was given to the parties to spend as they saw fit?
I'll take it that that was a question around a cap on donations. A cap on donations is not a current priority for the Government, but strengthening the rules around donations really is. Political parties, of course, play a vital role in our democracy, and it's important that they are able to fundraise effectively and communicate with the electorate, a very important part of our process. By law, it's the responsibility of political parties to take all reasonable steps to verify their donors and whether they're permissible. We will take necessary steps to ensure those requirements are tightened and stuck to.
My Lord, the Minister.
The noble stages of the National Security Bill, the last Conservative government and Conservative ministers pledged to enhance data sharing powers to allow public bodies to share data with political parties. And this is what we need. It's not the honest ones that come through, it's knowing who is coming through a tenuous route, so that the political parties were assisted in their due diligence. Can the noble Baroness, the Minister, tell me the status of those plans to provide more information to political parties?
Yeah.
As I explained in my earlier answer, we are reviewing all matters related to electoral donations, and that will be taken into account as we go through the process of developing any new legislation, including the issue raised by the noble lady.
The noble lady, the Minister, keeps referring to the fact that foreign donations are not allowed to parties in the United Kingdom, but of course that is not correct, because donations can come from the Irish Republic. So will the Minister and the Government look at that issue? Because in there lies a severe problem in that funds from the United States, for instance, can be channelled via the Irish Republic into political parties in the United Kingdom with representation in these houses. So can the Minister and the Government look at that issue?
The noble lord raises an important point. Political parties registered in Northern Ireland can also accept donations from Irish sources, such as Irish companies that meet prescribed conditions. Allowing Irish donations to Northern Ireland parties, of course, recognises the special place of Ireland in the political life and culture of Northern Ireland. The rules are consistent with the principles set out in the Good Friday Agreement. Irish donations are subject to the same scrutiny by the Electoral Commission as donations from any other permissible donor, and if there are any complaints about that, they must be referred to the Electoral Commission.
The last government extended the voting for people who've been out of this country for more than 15 years. That in itself wasn't very problematic, but it meant they all became permitted donors. So people who'd not lived in this country for 40, 50 years could become permitted donors, could give money with absolute no ability to check on the source of it. So could our noble friend assure me that when this is looked at, that aspect introduced by the last government will also be properly scrutinised?
My noble friend raises a very important issue. Political parties can only accept donations from registered electors, but of course that does now include overseas electors. They are subject to the same counter-fraud measures as domestic electors, including having their identity confirmed as part of the registration process. But she raises a very important issue, and of course that will be looked at as we look at all matters relating to elections.
My lords. My lords, in welcoming the response that the Minister gave to Lord Blunkett, in terms of a full consultation, she will be aware that the restrictions on expenditure in terms of elections was set in the days when you could only communicate with the electorate through leaflets and the like. There are now many different ways of doing so, many of which are very cheap and very low cost. Could she include in her review that she acknowledged to Lord Blunkett some assessment of the restrictions on expenditure in general for elections at whatever level?
I'm grateful for that question. There's no doubt that the system of campaigning has changed very dramatically, particularly in the last few years with the advent of social media. However, in my experience, which of campaigning goes over a number of decades, what political parties have done is they have adapted their campaigning. They haven't let go of the traditional methods of campaigning. So in effect, while social media can be a very effective and efficient way of campaigning, we still do rely on some of the traditional methods. But of course that will be looked at as part of the review we're undertaking.
My Lords, voter registration is at shockingly low levels. So can my noble friend the Minister update the House on implementing automated voter registration, as also recommended by the Electoral Commission?
I agree with my noble friend that there are a large number of people still unregistered, and when one goes out campaigning, it's very clear that there are people who are not registered to vote who probably should be. And I think we all need to address this and look at whatever way we can of making sure that everybody who's entitled to vote not only is registered to vote but does take part in our democracy. It's a very important part of our process, and we will do all we can to both increase voter registration and to increase participation in elections.
My Lord, the Intelligence and Security Committee Russia report hinted at the very considerable extent of Russian money flowing into British politics, both to some political parties and, of course, during the Brexit campaign. Will the government consider whether or not the redacted parts of that report should now be published to inform the public fully?
Hear, hear.
I'm happy to have a look at that, my lords, but we are very aware that this is a real issue, and we continue to be concerned about it, and we will continue to make sure we take whatever steps we can to avoid foreign interference in our elections.
Second oral question, Baroness Keeley.
Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, creative education and enriching experience must be for all and not just the preserve of the privileged few. Drama and theatre studies students at GCSE and A level are entitled to experience live theatre, and schools can and do decide which other visits to offer to other students. But it's also important that students can benefit during curriculum and lesson time, and that's why the Independent Curriculum and Assessment Review will seek to deliver a broader curriculum considering how best to support a young person to develop the knowledge and skills needed to thrive.
My Lords, there is evidence that the experience of attending live theatre helps children to learn, while structured arts activities at school can increase cognitive skills across all subject areas. And companies like the Royal Ballet and Opera and the RSC are doing amazing work in opening their doors to schools. But the Sutton Trust still reports that state school trips were cut by 68% in the most disadvantaged schools in 2023. Further, since the introduction of EBAC and Progress Aid, there has been a systematic downgrading of arts subjects and experiences in state schools. Can my noble friend the Minister tell me if it's a priority for the government to start to reverse these trends and ensure access to a creative education and arts experiences for all state school pupils to help build their confidence and their skills?
My noble friend rightly identifies that there has been a decline in the entries of students for arts and creative GCSEs, for example, a reduction in the number of staff available to teach them, and a fall-off in the ability of schools to be able to support students with visits and the type of experiences that she rightly outlines. That's why it's so important for this government that we ensure that creative subjects like art, music and drama are important elements of the education that every child deserves, and that we can do better in ensuring that culture is an essential part of supporting children and young people.
Can we also include members' interests where I'm a trustee of Tate? Could I say to the Minister how reassuring it is to see an education minister...
Leave the Conservative benches, please.
Could I say how reassuring it is to see an education minister addressing this question? Because to make arts education as effective as possible, close working between the Department of Education and the Department of Culture is essential. I'm afraid there is money involved. For example, visiting a theatre or a museum does cost schools money, and many of these museums have to find this money out of their own budgets as well. Will the Minister meet with her counterpart in DCMS and look at a strategy in the round to really engage our school children in meaningful visits to theatres and museums with some financial support to help that?
The noble lord is absolutely right that this is an area where it is important for those of us in the Department for Education to work across government with our colleagues in DCMS, and I can assure him that is already happening, and we are making sure that, as he will know, the £444 million being invested in arts by this Government and by the Arts Council is used to the best potential. And he will also know, of course, that 79% of the national portfolio supported by that money is already delivering activities specifically for children and young people. But we do need to ensure that schools and children are able to benefit from that.
Can we also,
My Lord. And the Lib Dem benches next. We will hear from the Lib Dem benches next.
Go on. My Lords, thank you for being allowed to speak. My Lords, would the Minister take on board the fact that the museums often tell you certain things about development? For instance, the importance of design technology. The fact that unless you develop the mouse to make the computer and something that we can all actually use easily and other things, it doesn't happen and doesn't become a mass tool. Can that information is best displayed by showing it? Can the Minister make sure this is an important part of the curriculum for those subjects?
Well, the Noble Lord makes an important point about the benefits of being as part of children's learning, of being able to actually see the development of ideas, the design of ideas. I wholeheartedly agree with him, and I think that will be an important part of our thinking about how we support existing initiatives for children to benefit from that, and how we ensure in the future that the curriculum and the opportunities for our schools to offer those opportunities for children are not only available but are also supported, particularly for those disadvantaged children who have too often missed out.
Can we also include, while we're at it, those young people who are in custodial systems? I myself am only here because I did art and creative things when I was in a juvenile detention centre, and unfortunately a lot of those opportunities are now disappeared in our custodial system for young people.
Well, I have no doubt, first of all, that a broad education that also enables children and young people to engage in creative activities is one of the things that protects against some of the circumstances that the Noble Lord identified. And as I have the Noble Lord Timpson sitting alongside me on the front bench, I have no... There, in fact. He flits. I have no doubt that he has also heard what the Noble Lord has to say, and he is a strong advocate to me and to other ministers about the need to ensure that everything that we provide, we also ensure those in custody are also able to benefit from, because of what it means for them as individuals and because of what it means for their future ability not to reoffend.
My Lords, my Lord.
I know that His Majesty's Government is particularly concerned about opportunities for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and I wondered if the Noble Lady, the Minister, could just update the House on how those children are able to access these trips, particularly bearing in mind the correspondence which I'm sure she will have seen from the special educational needs and disabilities transport operators, given their concerns of the impact of the increase of national insurance contributions on their ability to take 200,000 children to school every day.
The Noble Lady is absolutely right to identify that if we believe that these opportunities are important for children, then they also have to be perhaps even doubly important for those children with special educational needs and disabilities. That's why in trying to mend the special educational needs system that we have inherited, we will focus on ensuring that it is inclusive, that it enables all children, whether in mainstream schools or in special schools, to benefit from those things that will support them. And we will also find ways, for example, through the Music Opportunities pilot launched last autumn, to offer disadvantaged and special educational needs pupils across primary and secondary schools the opportunity, for example, to learn to play an instrument of their choice or to learn how to sing with free lessons. This is something that we're committed to and we will continue to develop.
My Lords, the schools feed universities, and the number of arts and humanities departments at universities has been in decline. I learned recently that, and I speak as a linguist, that if all the students training in modern languages in universities at the moment were all to go into teaching, we'd still only fund 70% of the posts, language teaching. So there's a systemic problem here with arts and humanities. Try and get a PhD funding for arts and humanities. It's increasingly difficult. Will the government commit to looking at the whole stream of the educational system and not just what we're looking at today with schools?
Well, the Right Reverend Prelate is absolutely right that in order to be able to offer opportunities to children, we need to have the qualified teachers in place to be able to deliver it. That's why this government has committed to recruiting 6,500 more teachers, and of course has in place the £10,000 tax-free bursary for teachers of art and design and of music. But it also means that we have to ensure that our higher education institutions receive the support necessary to develop these sorts of subjects. That's overall supporting the financial sustainability of higher education, and it's also, of course, the specific funding that we make available to support high-cost subjects, like subjects in performing and creative arts and media studies, and the government grant that we provide for small and specialist providers recognised as being world leading, of which out of the 20 we support, 12 are creative and performing arts providers.
Third oral question, Baroness Hazarika.
I beg leave to ask the question on the order paper in my name.
My Lords, the Government remains committed to bearing down on the Crown Court backlog, but the challenge in doing so is significant. The Lord Chancellor has commissioned an independent review of the criminal courts led by Sir Brian Leveson to recommend long-term reform. Sir Brian has been asked to specifically consider the merits of more trials heard outside Crown courts. Jury trials will always remain a cornerstone of our justice system, but for most serious cases, will always remain a cornerstone for most serious cases, but we must consider bold action to tackle the backlog in our courts.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and he's right. Because of the terrible inheritance on these court backlogs, we do have to think radically and we do have to think challenging. We have to think about the victims. There are some victims now who are having cases listed as far into early 2028. So can I ask him this? Is it right that a Class C drugs offence sits in the Crown Court queue while a vulnerable rape victim has to wait 5 years plus from report to court, which often risks them walking away and allowing a potential rapist to escape? And will he finally agree that justice delayed is justice denied?
So yes, I do agree with my noble friend that justice delayed is justice denied, and I also agree with the sentiments which she expressed in her question. But my Lords, I think that is the argument for bold reform, bold and ambitious reform, and that is what Sir Brian is going to be delivering, we very much hope and expect. And the review will consider the merits of longer-term reform as well as court efficiency, and Sir Brian will consider court reform options which would reduce the demand on the Crown Court, including reclassification of offences, consideration of magistrates' sentencing powers and the introduction of an intermediate court. The review will provide findings on court reform by spring of this year, and its findings on efficiency will be come forward by autumn of this year.
Will this government distance itself from the Conservatives who blamed the backlogs on COVID and on criminal barristers who had no option but to strike to secure proper remuneration? My Lords, will the noble Lord tell the House what immediate steps they propose to address the real causes of these record backlogs which delay trials and frustrate justice, in particular too few judges, lawyers and court staff, a wrong-headed cap on court sitting days, severely criticised by the Lady Chief Justice, which has led to unplanned courtroom closures and trials adjourned through listing and prisoner transport mistakes?
My Lords, the two factors which the Noble Lord referred to are real factors, COVID and the action by the barristers. However, there is an underlying problem of increasing cases coming to Crown Court, and that overlays the other problems to which the Noble Lord referred. The government has increased the number of allocated sitting days to 108,500, and that is the highest level in almost a decade. The government has also increased the sentencing powers of magistrates' courts from 6 months to 12 months. Nevertheless, my Lords, with these two increases, there does need to be further radical reform to address the problem to which the Noble Lord has referred.
My Lords, as the Noble Lord the Minister noted, much of the Crown Court backlog can be traced back to the effects of the COVID epidemic. And indeed, I acknowledge that there has been an increase in the number of sitting days for the Crown Court. However, the Lady Lord Chief Justice has indicated that there are a further 4,500 sitting days available. And we're in a situation in which many major Crown Court centres are sitting at only half capacity, with many of their courts simply empty. There are courts available, there are judges available, but I'm repeatedly advised that there are not suitable defence counsel available, many of them having been driven out of criminal practice due to the absence of a sustainable fee income. A recent increase in legal aid fees has been granted to solicitors in criminal practice. Is it not time for this government to address a similar increase for barristers in criminal practice?
My Lords, the Noble and Learned Lord is right to draw attention to the 12% increase in fees for solicitors, criminal aid solicitors, and that's a substantial amount of money. And I can say the government is exploring options to incentivise the early resolution of cases, and that includes the remuneration of everyone within the criminal justice sector. The government is informed by the Noble Lord Bellamy's report of 2021, and considerations are ongoing on this matter.
My Lord, sitting with two assessors, I tried a brutal rape and GBH case. The perpetrator was found guilty. Had we had trial by jury, it would have added weight to the conviction and sentencing. Is it the best way of dealing with court backlog at request the Lord Chancellor and the Judicial Appointments Commission to appoint more judges, persuade retired judges, including the noble and learned lords, to put all hands to the pump? They are sprightly.
So I thank the Noble Lord, or the Right Reverend Prelate, for his observations. I think we're taking a different approach, if I may say, and that is to look at the overall working efficiency of the court system. I do acknowledge that there are substantial backlogs, particularly in rape cases, and that is because very often they're very complex cases, and also there is the added distressing fact that many rape victims drop out of the process because of the lengthy delay. So I absolutely acknowledge that is a problem. But we do believe the best way to address this is to look at the system, the way the system operates as a whole, and we are looking forward to receiving Sir Brian's recommendations in due.
My Lords, I hope my noble friend the Minister knows I have a lifetime of respect for professional tribunals, for lawyers and for judges, including Sir Brian, and their fair remuneration. But notwithstanding concerns about the backlog, which are considerable, I hope he agrees with me that there will always be benefit in jury trial for the most serious cases. And that benefit is about public confidence and legitimacy and participation in the legal system on which the rule of law depends.
I completely agree with my noble friend. Public confidence is absolutely paramount, and it's one of the reasons that jury trials were persisted with, quite rightly, during the COVID period. But having said that, there are certain types of cases where maybe it's not appropriate that a jury trial should be available, and it's those sorts of cases which I anticipate Sir Brian is looking at.
My Lords, outside.
My Lords, will the Noble Lord, the Minister, agree with me that the current outstanding backlog in the Crown Court is a little over 73,000, and it was only 40,000 when COVID struck? The Noble Lord has already indicated that the volume of cases coming into the Crown Court continues to increase. Is there really any other solution which has occurred to the Noble Lord or his colleagues other than to restrict the right to jury trial for the relatively low-grade cases of the sort that the Noble Lady Baroness Hazarika spoke of, which clutter up the Crown Court?
I think the Noble and Learned Lord makes a very fair point, and it is regrettable that the numbers are so high and they're increasing. That is the underlying problem which we are grappling with within the Ministry of Justice. It's interesting that within the family court system, we're back down to the numbers pre-COVID, which is good, and we're trying to bear down on that further. But nevertheless, the Noble Lord makes a very good point, and I'm sure that Sir Brian Leveson will be addressing these points.
Lords, my Lords, the Noble Lord, the Minister, will be aware of considerable concerns articulated by, amongst others, the Magistrates Association on the single justice procedure and the impact on vulnerable people, such as people with dementia, people with cancer, that have been brought to court. And as he knows, the system is a magistrate and a lay expert supporting him. Will those issues, which are long-standing since the establishment of the single justice procedure in 2015, be part of his ongoing review, as articulated by his right honourable friend Heidi Alexander 2 months ago?
I have sat as a single justice on certain types of cases, and I understand there are concerns about single justice procedure. I'm not actually sure of the answer to his question about whether it's part of Sir Brian's review, and I'll write to the Noble Lord on that question.
Question? Lord Hayne.
I leave to answer the question standing my name on the order paper.
Lords, resolving the conflict has been a priority since day one of this government. The fighting must stop, and all sides must seize the opportunity to open a pathway to lasting peace and stability. We're encouraged by the progress being made on ceasefire negotiations and urge all parties to show the flexibility needed to reach an agreement. We continue to use every diplomatic lever to bring about a ceasefire and secure the safe release of hostages in coordination with international partners.
My Lords, but doesn't my noble friend the Minister agree that the Palestinians, Israelis, indeed the whole world, need a permanent ceasefire? Not a quick fix, but a real end to hostilities. All the hostages out, the return of Palestinian civilians to what little remains of their Gaza homes north and south, no more starvation, which means preserving UNRWA, no reduction in the size of this integral part of the state of Palestine, and no Israeli settlements. A Marshall Plan for the recovery in Gaza, and everyone held to respecting international law. Surely that is the only path to real and stable peace for both Israelis and Palestinians, and how will the government help achieve that?
I thank my noble friend and acknowledge the work that he did as Minister for Middle East and North Africa. He's absolutely right that a permanent peace is what we need to seek. A ceasefire would only ever be the first step. The hostages must be released and be home with their families. And we agree with him also on the, how important it is that UNRWA is able to continue its work. He asked about reconstruction, and we are thinking very much about the next phase of planning in Gaza and building up Gaza's governance and security institutions. This must be predicated on tangible progress towards a Palestinian state.
My Lords. My Lords. My Lords, I'm sure that the whole House is united in wishing to see peace in this terrible conflict. The key to a sustainable end to the fighting in Gaza remains, firstly, the elimination of Hamas, and secondly, the release of the hostages. The suffering of the hostages is truly intolerable, and it should be intolerable for anyone that cares about human dignity and human rights. Does the Minister therefore have any information on the well-being of the British national hostage, Emily Damari?
He's completely right in everything he said about the hostages. My friend, Minister Faulkner, Minister for the Middle East, the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister have met on several occasions with the family of Emily and others with British links who are wrongly held in Gaza. We're doing everything we can, using all the levers that we can to secure their release, and they should be released immediately.
It's any agreement that will allow the hostages home and the violence against the Palestinian civilians to end will only come too soon. Does the Minister agree with me that the most represented group of Palestinian deaths, verified casualties, are children between the age of 5 and 9, and the suffering will continue even if there is a ceasefire, because there are no education facilities separate to those provided by UNRWA, and there are no health facilities, especially health facilities for girls. So will the UK play a crucial role, as it did after the liberation of Mosul, which was to support pop-up education, psychosocial support for young children in particular? Because if there is to be long-term sustainable peace, we cannot allow a traumatised generation of children to continue to suffer.
Yes, I can agree with him on that. The ceasefire would only be the beginning, and he's also right to remind us that around 50% of the identified bodies in Gaza so far have been those of children and of women. We're providing substantial aid to UNRWA and to other agencies who are providing the support that he wishes to see in Gaza and in neighbouring places as well, including education, including food, including medicine, and the psychosocial support that they're going to need for some years to come.
My Lord, strongly welcome the possibility of an end to the killing. But isn't the sad lesson of the history of this region that the world's attention is strongly on the region and the need for solutions, as long as violence is threatened or immediate? But as soon as the violence goes away, the world's attention moves elsewhere. And isn't it vital that that doesn't, after this slaughter that's taken place, isn't it vital that we do try and build something constructive out of it, which can only occur in the long term if the Palestinians have a state of their own?
That is right, and the United Kingdom government stands ready to play a leading role in reconstruction and securing a stable Palestinian state alongside a secure Israel. Gaza's recovery and reconstruction must be Palestinian-led, though, and support for future governance of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza and maintaining the viability of a future Palestinian state is an important part of the UK's approach.
My Lords, to follow on from the last question, it is vitally important that there is a sustainable reconciliation process that happens, hopefully, after any peace deal. But bearing in mind what happened with us in Northern Ireland dealing with domestic terrorism, isn't it important to set rules in relation to any elections that take place to any Palestinian Authority? And wouldn't those rules have to include a commitment to non-violence and recognition of the State of Israel?
I think these issues of reconciliation and truth and the process that needs to be undergone is fiendishly difficult, as she herself has experienced. But you look at any of these processes anywhere in the world, from Chile to South Africa, Northern Ireland, and I hope in the future in Israel, Gaza. But the point that she made that very well.
In recognising, and I'm sure I speak for all in your Lordship's House, the importance of a peace agreement, we're on the brink. and we hope, and for those of faith pray, that this agreement is reached. Will the noble Baroness, the Minister, acknowledge, as I do, the important role the United States and indeed both the incoming administration have played, the important role Egypt have played, but in particular Qatar for their persistence in ensuring this deal is reached? We all want to see the hostages released. We want to see aid into Gaza, and we want to see peace and security across the Holy Land. And will the Minister ensure that the momentum we see, as others have said, is sustained? You must be in the game, you must persist, you must keep the momentum going to see the peace and security we also desire, but most importantly, Israelis and Palestinians need now.
He is right, and it is important that we acknowledge the role that all players who have been instrumental in facilitating negotiations and smoothing this along, including, as he says, the United States, Egypt and Qatar, have played. And we do have hope, of course we do, given recent announcements, but I would draw a strong distinction between hope and optimism. I think we need to be realistic and patient, but our hope remains, and that is, I have more hope today than perhaps we did a week ago.
Does my noble friend agree that there has also been an increase in violence on the West Bank? Will the government confirm that it is totally opposed to any expansion of settlements on the West Bank, no matter what the American government decides?
Well, I think, as we've discussed previously, the problem with settlements and some of the activity we've seen around the settlements is that it makes the two-state solution more difficult in practical terms to deliver. So we do have concerns, as he says.
My the noble Lord, the Minister, confirm that in respect of these particular talks, quite apart from the absolute vital necessity of the release of the hostages, it is very much the imperative that the Israelis are to be made to open more spaces for relief to starving Palestinians in Gaza and elsewhere.
My Lords, the Israeli government has a responsibility to allow aid to those who need it. The situation is urgent. The hunger and the cold and the deaths that we have seen of young children because of the change in the weather is appalling, and we do appeal to the Israeli government to allow the necessary aid to reach those who need it.
My Lords, the Minister take this opportunity to recognise the courage and the commitment of those groups of Israelis and Palestinians working for peace who have continued to do so throughout this conflict, and will she also ensure that they are involved in the desperately difficult process that will follow any ceasefire of building a sustainable peace?
As in many conflicts, there are some incredibly courageous, brave individuals who risk their own lives in order to bring forward the cause of peace. And I think it is only right that we're reminded of those people today. We should also remember the 300 aid workers who have been killed throughout this conflict, and I thank her for her comments.